What is going on, everyone, and welcome back up inside your favorite ballpark for In the Booth. Flobo Boyce here, rocking with you with individuals who support the sport of all things baseball. And if you're watching this right now, you're probably locked and loaded for the World Baseball Classic. I know I am. Shout out to Team Nicaragua, because if you guys know, you know. But we're not talking about World Baseball Classic today. We're talking about how we take in the game and what that really means for fans throughout its history. And I thought this subject was pretty cool, and so had to get the coolest guy on the planet to be on the show. So please welcome Dr. Seth Tannenbaum, Assistant Professor of Sports Studies at Manhattanville University, who has written the book Bleacher Seats and Luxury Suites, Democracy and Division of the 20th Century Ballpark. That's a mouthful, but it means the world to me. Doctor, how's it going, sir?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on. I'm real excited to be here.
You know, I was excited that you actually covered something that was going through my mind in this world of priority passes and hospitality packages. I'm a big professional wrestling guy. That's my eyes got opened up to what that really meant to be at the event, but in another lane, another expression, but it seems to be all over sport as well. Talk to me about this and how it relates to baseball. What was the first time they really opened your eyes about this kind of dynamic of having normal tickets for the masses and something special for those who were to pay a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm a diehard baseball fan, grew up a Phillies fan, and then got into studying sports in from an academic perspective in graduate school. So I sort of have two brains about this. I've got fan brain and I've got academic brain. So fan brain, one of the biggest, most powerful memories for me of that sort of division is on Fan Appreciation Day at the end of the season. Usually it's like the last Sunday home game, right? They give away random prizes to people and they announce the ticket locations over the loudspeaker at the ballpark. And whenever it was one of the luxury suites, everybody in the ballpark booed. And to me, right, it's just like, people are getting free stuff. Oh, no, it's like suite 4. Boo. Right. So in the fan brain, that really got me thinking about that. In the academic sense, when I began to really study this in graduate school and read a lot of the rhetoric about the fan experience at baseball games, that it was this site of small d democratic egalitarianism where everybody is equal and everybody is represented. And then you think about the reality of that really clicked into me, that it was saying one thing and doing something else entirely.
Yeah. And it is interesting. Where does that original, I won't say lie, but the lore comes from? Because I felt that the same way too. You see old newsreels of people packing in, wearing their Sunday best. But you're right. It doesn't seem that like this kind of like social strata that came out of nowhere. What exactly is that disconnect as far as what we think and what the reality was?
Yeah. So what's interesting about the reality of it is that there is some truth to it. For the people who did have access to the ballpark, it was one of those experiences of coming together as a community across whatever differences may exist, because you are all cheering for the same team and you're all, standing up at the same time and doing all these other things. And that people in other ballparks around the country are also doing the same thing. So it is both an actual community that you interact with and something of an imagined community, because in your head, you imagine that people are doing this in other places as well. So there is some truth in that. It's not just made up out of whole cloth. Mm-hmm. But from the very beginning of professional baseball, bleacher seats have been cheaper than, boxes by the field. And one section was intended for people of more working class or lower middle class background, and one for more upper middle class or wealthy background. And there was no formal policy that said, well, if you only make this much per year, you can only sit here. But people knew that the kinds of behaviors that were going to happen in different parts of the ballpark were going to be associated with different socioeconomic classes. Yeah. And for women, especially in the late 19th century and early 20th century, it was not appropriate for them to sit in the bleachers. It was not seen as socially acceptable. So women, when they were welcomed into the ballpark, which was not all the time and certainly not as equals, were really only supposed to be in the grandstands. So these divisions are baked in that way. Yeah. In ballparks, major and minor, across the South, black fans were segregated into the worst seats in the ballpark, into the bleacher seats, and maybe the seats extremely far down the first and third base lines. White fans could sit there. It wasn't like a black fan only section, but black fans could not buy tickets to the grandstands. This kind of separation has always been baked in. Over the course of the 20th century, some of these physical barriers drop away, right? The last major league ballpark to be formally segregated is Sportsman's Park in St. Louis. They dropped their policy in 1944. What we see after that are major league teams moving their ballparks further and further away from black neighborhoods and black communities, moving to the suburbs, moving to places that aren't mass transit accessible. So these barriers have been sometimes formal, sometimes informal, always shifting to deliver an experience geared at people who look like me and not at people who don't look like me.
And I'm so glad you talked about the suburbanization of some of the ballparks. So we'll get to that in a second. But I guess the idea of the business versus the moral ground, right? Like I would think that a company, an organization, LLC, or whatever that owns a team wants to maximize revenue. But you're saying that despite that, there are some societal expectations on top of that. And I wonder, when did that fade away? When did it become, we don't care as long as you're paying green, as far as like, there's no way they can do this or be sit here or have this part of the park to themselves?
Yeah, so it's really tricky. I think if you asked the owners at all of the times that they're making these decisions to appeal directly to certain groups and to make it more difficult for other groups, they would claim that they were maximizing revenue. Now, whether they're right or not is a whole other thing. Baseball owners have historically been incredibly economically conservative. They don't like taking risks. They're reluctant to pick up night baseball. That's very, very slow. They're obviously reluctant to integrate. And that's not because they're worried about the skill levels of black players coming out of the Negro Leagues. It's because they're worried, will white fans show up? And will black players attract black fans? And if black fans come in large numbers, will we lose all our white fans? So from their framework, if, not to put words into their heads, but my reading of this is that they would say, if we get more black fans, we're going to lose the fans we already have. And there aren't enough black fans to make up for that. And we can't, as upper class white owners, foresee a successful financial future built primarily on fans of color. They just couldn't see that. So they didn't think that the white fans would be comfortable sitting near black fans, interacting with black fans, potentially being in the minority. So in order to maximize revenue, they say, well, we can either lose all the white fans who are predominantly middle class and upper class and bring in a bunch of working class fans of color and maybe some middle class fans of color, but we can't have everybody. And they make that decision, yes, about fans of color, but they make that decision about working class white fans at different times as well. When the National League is founded, they are explicitly aiming for middle class fans. So we're talking like 1870s, 1880s. They set their minimum ticket prices above what working class fans can afford. They don't allow baseball games on Sunday. And in many cities, baseball games are prohibited on Sundays because of the Sabbatarian, the Sunday Blue laws that say you can't open certain businesses on Sundays. But even in places where that's not on the books, the National League says you can't play on Sundays. And this is a time when working class jobs are 6 days a week. So the only days that a working class fan could come to the game would be on a Sunday. So by banning that, they're saying, actually, I don't want to appeal to the massive number of people I can. I actually just want to keep it to the middle class because I think as an owner, right, that's the way in the long term I'm going to make the most money. So there's a whole series, right? And you can say the same thing about women. They're like, we could, try and attract actual women to the ballpark. And then there are all these articles about, when there's ladies' days and there are women everywhere, the men don't have a good time and they don't want to come back. So there are all these various times where, perfect, world capitalist economy of, so the best way to make profit is to attract everybody, comes in contrast with people's stereotypes or owners' perceptions of people's stereotypes. And they just double down on appealing to the middle and upper class white men who have for so long been the core of baseball's audience. They're scared to lose that core, so they just keep doubling down on it.
Yeah, something you said that rang true for me. Many careers ago, I was in marketing, and you can present all the research in the world, and there'd be one guy who's like, I think would be the opposite, and that process just gets dead in the water. I had the pleasure in my life of going to all 30 major league ballparks. It was a dream of mine. It took me 4 seasons. Really expensive because no one told me how poor infrastructure is in this country. But the 2 ballparks I really feel the least comfortable with are made in 2 different eras, but for similar reasons. Now, I'm from New York. I live in Los Angeles now. But I didn't have the best time going to Dodger Stadium or Truist Park in Atlanta. And I wanted to talk to you about that because it felt to me very, in a word, cynical that Truist was built on a citadel, like miles away from the core of Atlanta, in a fake town. The Battery was built around it, whereas Dodger Stadium is in the middle of Chavez Ravine on a hill that overlooks the city.
Yeah. So you're right that they are built in very different eras to serve a very similar purpose. Dodger Stadium is built very much in reaction to what's going on in Brooklyn, where the Dodgers were before, around Ebbets Field, where the neighborhood is becoming increasingly poor and increasingly populated by people of color. And the Dodgers' longtime middle class and upper middle class white fans are moving out to places like Long Island and North Jersey and Westchester County. And they can't drive to and park at Ebbets Field. And the streetcars don't run as much. And you can't take the train directly there. So Dodger Stadium is built into a hillside surrounded by 16,000 parking spots so that everybody can drive there. And by everybody, the Dodgers' Walter O'Malley is primarily thinking about middle and upper class white Angelenos. He, to his credit, is not opposed to attracting Black fans from Los Angeles. And the Dodgers, because of their history with Jackie Robinson, do have a real legitimate core of Black fans in LA. And one of the reasons why they are successful in beating back a voting referendum about giving them the land at Chavez Ravine is the overwhelming electoral support of Black Angelenos in that election. But it is utterly not mass transit accessible. It's slightly more so now than it used to be. And when it first opens, so Dodger Stadium has 5 tiers, basically, right? 5 different decks. And when it opens, there's no connections between the different decks. So you have to park in the part of the hillside that is on the same level as your tier. And then you walk straight into it. So you've got people driving in their private cars, parking in a parking lot around people who sit near them, and walking into their section of the ballpark where you can't actually get to any other section of the ballpark. It's functionally a gated community rather than a neighborhood. And I didn't even talk about the fact that Dodger Stadium is built on top of the remains, the destruction of 3 very lovely Mexican-American communities that had been largely depopulated under the promise of building public housing. That public housing falls apart in the Red Scare, and the last residents of those 3 communities are evicted as the Dodgers are in Los Angeles playing at the Coliseum and getting ready to build Dodger Stadium. And that is one of the many reasons why they are unsuccessful in drawing Latinx fans from Los Angeles until Fernando Valenzuela, until they stumble onto Fernando in the 1980s. I mean, stumble is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration because O'Malley is so concerned about trying to appeal to that fan base by signing Mexican-American players and players from Mexico that he lies about the ancestry of a player by the name of Phil Ortega, claims that Phil Ortega is Mexican-American. Phil Ortega is a Native American from New Mexico, I believe, of Native American ancestry from New Mexico, speaks no Spanish, and is upset about being falsely cast as Mexican-American because he feels like his heritage is being denied. Mm-hmm. Truist Park, very similar reasons. Let's get out of what our fans seem to see as a decaying city. Although, they moved from what was a mass transit accessible ballpark. When I visited Atlanta for a conference about 10 years ago, I took a MARTA train to a stop where I got a free shuttle bus to the ballpark. It was nice and easy. I didn't have to think about it, didn't have to get a car, didn't have to do anything like that. But the Braves were not even selling out their playoff games because fans didn't want to go. And their fans were articulating this, and the Braves were doubling down on this by saying, our fans don't want to go to that part of Atlanta. That they had this map that said that the core of their fan base was out in Cobb County, where they relocated. And what that map showed, if it actually showed what it said it showed, which isn't really even clear, was that season ticket holders, who are, because of financial necessity, going to be primarily upper middle class, lived in the suburbs, which should not come as a surprise to anyone who's ever visited Atlanta. That's where people of means tend to live, in Atlanta. And some of their fans who lived out in Cobb County, I have this incredibly telling letter from a fan who basically says, like, oh, it's good that they're moving to a ballpark that is absolutely not mass transit accessible because mass transit brings crime. And it's just littered with coded language, minimally coded language saying, I don't like to go to baseball games when there are Black people who live nearby.
Right.
So you telling me that you felt uncomfortable at those two ballparks is not really a surprise to me necessarily. Maybe there were some other ballparks in my head that I might guess you might have also not felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
But those two certainly don't surprise me. I mean, I'm thinking right now about the statue that the Texas Rangers just installed on their concourse. I just mind-bogglingly in tune with baseball's history of, indifference isn't the right word, but lack of desire to attract back Black fans.
Yeah.
It just fits so much into that historical pattern. It's really, really deeply upsetting.
I feel, well, you don't know this, but on this show, I say this story all the time. So bear with me, long-term listeners, about the one time I wanted to walk out of a baseball game was Atlanta at Globe Life. It felt very much, as we would say, America. And, I never felt like I wasn't invited to something something I bought a ticket for, which is kind of my next question. So let's say there are barriers of location and maybe the team itself doesn't appeal to communities and they don't do as much, but you scrimp and you save. You buy a ticket and you bring your family to the ballpark. Every team has their own expressions, but like, what can teams do to attract teams, make them feel welcome? I felt welcome in Seattle, for example, but I know in Texas, they're the only team that doesn't have a pride night, for example. So I would not bring my LGBTQ friends to that particular team. So is there something you can do? Is it at the team level or is it all like in big culture? Like, where do we land on that?
So I think this is a question I've been getting a lot when I've been talking to people recently, is sort of like, how can we make change on this? And I think that the answer is at all those levels, right? Teams have to have affinity nights for everyone who's actually in their community. I think that is really important. And it's just a start, though. But fans also, as individuals, have to expect that the person sitting next to them is a fan and is a knowledgeable fan, and not assume, based on whatever piece of identity that you seem to glean on upon, that they're new to baseball or that they don't know baseball or anything like that. There are all sorts of levels and ways for people to feel comfortable, right? You can feel affirmed by the team having a night that celebrates your identity or your heritage or something like that. You can feel affirmed because the team honors people who share something with you, right? Maybe they've got, a team Hall of Fame. Maybe they've got retired jerseys, whatever it is. Maybe they have an award named after someone. But you can also, that can happen. And then you can have a miserable experience because you're sitting near someone who is being racist or sexist or homophobic or ignorant or whatever. So I think it really needs to happen at all of those levels. There are so many accounts of from female baseball fans that I assign in my spectators and fans class, that I assign in my baseball and American society class, of super knowledgeable female baseball fans who go to baseball games and are treated like they don't know anything, who get their male partners to come with them, right? After their male partners who don't care about baseball. And everyone near them assumes that the male partner is the fan and that the female baseball fan is just being tagged along and, and doesn't really know anything, doesn't really care. So I really do think it's at all of those levels. And when you do encounter someone who isn't a fan the same way you are, who doesn't know everything, to teach in a way, to share in a way, to share your love for the game in a way that isn't demeaning, in a way that is instructive and teaching and explains why you fell in love with the game. And I do think if people, individuals did that and teams collectively did those bigger things, that maybe baseball could actually begin to be more of that place that it has long claimed to be.
I had the pleasure of getting season tickets at a premium level. It's soccer, but just because soccer's way cheaper here in this country. LA Galaxy, got the private parking spot. I had like the food options. It felt grand. It took a little bit harder to get tickets. I have a ticket rep. I had to call them up for things. And I realized as I sat upon my padded seat throne, how hard it is for access to things for those who may even have the means and the money, what it takes to like get yourself ingrained in that other side of things. Now, people who are the top 1%, top 0.5%, probably second nature. But I wonder if there was a way, a path to open up these luxury suites to a bit more. Not everyone, obviously, it's luxury for a reason. Will that help, or that would be a hindrance from an anthropological standpoint?
I think if there were ways to get more people into an experience that was going to entertain them, even if they weren't super excited about the game yet, that would grow the game, right? I mean, yeah, I say this as a sports fan who thinks that sports are inherently interesting and that people exposed to them will understand that they are inherently interesting once they begin to understand the game. So if you're sitting there as an owner and you've got an empty luxury suite because it's, the Galaxy from 2 years ago when they were terrible, and let's say playing Montreal, historically, recently terrible team, right? Those tickets aren't going to sell. So why not give a luxury suite to a Boys and Girls Club? Why not give a luxury suite to some community organization, right? And use it as a loss leader. Even in that situation, right? Those fans, even if they're ignorant, even if they're not behaving, ignorant of the game, even if they're not behaving in the ways that the other fans in the stadium behave, they're in a luxury suite. They're not going to bother anybody else. And that's something that baseball has done for decades, is they would allow kids into the game for free, but they would say, if you get this many box tops, or if you, come in with, one adult can bring in 5 kids for free, but you can only sit in this section so that your behavior doesn't impact everybody else. You're introducing those kids for free, and everybody else is like, fine, whatever, because you're not in my way. You're not doing this right in front of me. So I really do think that can be a way to get people into it, to, invite them into this experience. And then, maybe 20% of them become fans, but that's more people than you had before. And I just don't know how much owners and team executives are really thinking that way.
Forgive me if this question comes across as crass, but what made you care about the others when it comes to sport? Because I felt the same way you're feeling about it. And I was kind of like, man, things are really messed up. Well, time to go home. What's on TV? But you took an extra step and became a scholar of the subject. What was really the motivating factor for you?
That's a really deep and probing question. That's a really good question. What made me care? I inherently want people to enjoy the things that I enjoy. So, it's selfish on that level. Yeah. But I have a good time when I am surrounded by people with different life experiences from me. It appeals to me. I have an inherent desire for people to be treated equally and fairly. I'm sure it is not unrelated to the fact that I went to a Quaker school from kindergarten through 12th grade and had drummed into me, that there's that of God in everyone, that there is a level of equality in everyone, and everyone should be treated the same. And I just like it. I don't really know how to explicitly state what made me care about this so much, other than I just do.
I'm so glad you say that, because a lot of times we sit with the barbershops, we talk about life. There is a bit of defeatist attitude. Oh man, you can't fight City Hall, man. Like it's just the way it be sometimes. Or hey, guys don't do this, or we don't do that, or we're not comfortable here. And we collectively, depending on, I have many cross sections. I'm left-handed, I'm Caribbean, I'm black. I'm not just saying just in one community or another. There is a bit of like, well, that's just the way it is. But I love the fact that you said no, it doesn't have to be. And in fact, your book, which is the time this gets released, will be out just a couple weeks after that. Bleacher Seats and Luxury Suites, Democracy and Division, 20th Century Ballpark, really goes into depth about why it's important to care. So I commend you. I didn't mean to be like, "Why you care, sucker." It's more like, "Oh man, thank you so much for doing so good."
I know. I took that question, I think, as you intended it. It's just, it's a deep question. Like, why does somebody care about people being treated fairly? If I knew more about that, if I could explain that more, I don't think I'd be a sports studies professor. I think I'd be in a much bigger role in society. Let me put it that way.
Well, let me ask you this. If I get invited to a Phillies game with you, how do you experience the game? Do you go on top deck? Are you behind home plate? Are you a luxury suite guy? Where do you sit?
So I have been incredibly fortunate that my dad and I have had Sunday season ticket plans to the Phillies since 2003. We had wanted, 2003 was the last year of Veterans Stadium. I was in the end of my junior year in high school, and we wanted to be at opening day in 2004 at the new ballpark. And one of the ways to guarantee how to do that was if you bought a season ticket plan, you'd get first priority to an opening day ticket in 2004. And that privilege is financial, that my parents could afford to plop down 2 tickets to 13 games in advance. And at the Vet, every seat at the Vet was bad. The first year at Citizens Bank Park, we sat in like the third deck along the left field line, but the Phillies weren't great in 2004. So by 2005, we could move. And we got the front row of the top deck immediately behind home plate. And it is a great place to view a baseball game. We see everything. The only thing you can't really see is up and down on the strike zone, but everything else you see. I love sitting there. Nobody walks in front of you in the front row. We're in the middle of the front row, so nobody's getting up. That's how I really enjoy a game, and I talk through it. I'm usually there with my dad, who was my baseball coach growing up. So it's what are they throwing next? His best friend from college was an umpire for a long time. So he's talking to me about the umpire rotations because he understands, when the ball is hit here, the umpires do this. Did you see how they did that? So I watch the game as someone who lives and breathes it and analyzes it as we go.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Do you score games, or you just kind of vibe out and listen, make it a picking kind of a thing?
I don't score games while I'm at Major League games. My dad taught me to score games when I was about 8 because his high school team, he was a coach of a high school team, his manager wasn't going to be at a game. So he's like, you know the game. I'll teach you how to score. So I know how to keep score really well, but I don't do it at games, although I love it when people sitting around me are keeping score and I have to, if they get distracted, I have to explain the WW scoring, which is my favorite little scoring story. Do you know the WW?
No, I'm learning how to score.
WW is what you write when you weren't watching. So somebody gets on first base and you don't know how. So you write, you draw the line to first base and you write WW, wasn't watching.
That's cool. Yeah. Just for your own records. Oh yeah, I was looking at my hot dog then. That's how it is. And speaking of, are you a hot dog guy, burger guy?
I am a hot dog guy. I do write in the book about the purported origin of hot dogs at the Polo Grounds. They were not actually invented at the Polo Grounds, but for a long time, people claimed that they were invented at the Polo Grounds. I do like a good all beef hot dog.
To be fair, if there was a place where mystery meat would be invented, it'd probably be in the bowels of the polo grounds,
Yes.
somewhere in the right field, way down there. Right.
It does track. It absolutely tracks, which is probably why that myth stuck around for so long.
Well, we were talking about the idea of many different ways to build the game of baseball, and baseball to me is in a bit of its renaissance. You see a lot more TV outlets, a lot more channels taking on it. Like I said, World Baseball Classic is back. Kind of a joke on the show. We talk about how much I love Nicaragua, who's like ranked next to last. But as we wind this down here today, I have
Baker, though.
That's what I was trying to tell you. And I'm a Mark Vientos guy. I mean, come on, man. Like they beat Germany too. They got in. They're not slouches. They're probably eliminated by the time I record this. But I got to ask you, in your opinion, is baseball cool? Why or why not?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. And I was once interviewed by a New York Times journalist who was basically trying to figure out why baseball isn't cool. And I was like, well, his argument, this was about 5 years ago now. His argument was basically like, in America, cool is defined as what Black people think is cool, and therefore baseball is not cool. And I thought that was an interesting argument. I don't know that he had all the evidence to support it, but I thought it was an interesting argument. I think baseball absolutely can be cool, but I'm also not cool. I'm a nerd. I'm a historian.
Nerds are cool.
I'm not hip. I do think it can be cool, and I think it has been cool, and it has been popular, and it is cool for sure. I think in Japan, it's cool in parts of the Caribbean. What it's going to take to be the dominant thing in America, I don't know if that's going to happen, but it has the potential to be that, because it's I say this as a baseball fan, what baseball players do is cool. The plays, the skills, you begin to see more baseball shaping style culture, which I think is a big marker of cool. I think that major league players now, with their all the restrictions lifted on what color cleats and guards and yada yada they can wear, they are becoming style signifiers, and that's a part of being cool. So I think baseball is less uncool than it used to be. It's not Ken Griffey Jr. cool, and it may not be Ken Griffey Jr. cool again for a while, but it's less uncool than it used to be.
It is fascinating you mentioned this, because we will have guests on this show. I mean, this In the Booth has been on for about 2 years. Black Baseball Mixtape's been on for like 5. And we talk about the coolness of baseball, and Griffey always comes up. I mean, has there anyone been that cool in so long? Like, swingman was a whole movement. Guys wore swingman shoes to school, which is unheard of in the basketball era, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, so you're also saying this to a guy born in 1985. So Ken Griffey Jr. is like, aside from the Phillies, right, where I grew up, my earliest baseball memories are like, wow, Ken Griffey Jr., backwards hat, the whole thing. It was a time when baseball was, I think, statistically more popular in terms of TV audience, not in terms of attendance. Baseball's doing great in terms of attendance right now, but in terms of people defining it as their favorite sport, I think it was much more popular then. He was such a cool story. Playing alongside his dad, hitting back-to-back home runs with his dad. It just hit so many different baseball metrics, for lack of a better word, of like, the nostalgia of baseball, playing catch with your dad. And also just being so, he was called the Kid, right? Like, that's it. It's a kid's game, right? He just hit all of those elements. And I think that's some of the reasons why he was so cool.
And I would say you're cool and hip, even though you say you're a nerd, self-proclaimed nerd, but we're all kind of nerdy. Want to thank you so much for your time here today. It means a lot to just sit there and talk to you academically about how baseball impacts so many others. If someone wants to learn more about you or your book, now's the time. Let us know how you get in contact.
So I've got a website. It's SethTannenbaum.com. You can follow me on Instagram and Threads at Seth S. Tannenbaum, PhD. I'm Seth S. Tannenbaum on Blue Sky. I don't really do X anymore. You can shoot me an email. If you want to chat, my email is on my Manhattanville University website. You can happy to hear from you. And you can buy the book, Bleacher Seats and Luxury Suites, Democracy and Division at the 20th Century Ballpark. If you buy it from the University of Illinois Press website, a 30% off code that you can use is S26UIP. And that'll save you 30% at checkout.
Yeah, I'll check that out for sure. By the way, I hated hot dogs until I started going to games as an adult because they were way cheaper than like burgers or fries. So it was an economical move for me. The hot dog night was totally intentional.
Yeah.
This is In the Booth. Thanks so much. I want to be able to have you back on later on if that's okay, because this is a really fascinating discussion, and I appreciate the time you shared today.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and I would love to come back.